Have you ever made a promise and then broke it, whether intentional or not? I mean, you're human. So, yes, you have done that more than once, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. But what about God? What about when God makes a promise? Does he ever break it? And before you answer that question, we can check the record. But the answer is no. The timing, that is what we have a problem with. But today, we're going to see just how perfect the timing is. Welcome to a beginner's commentary to the book of Genesis, chapter 13. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to this teaching series. Hey, before we get started, I want to check in with you. Are you learning anything? Is this blessing you? I really want to hear from you. So please leave a comment. Let's engage. Oh, and stick around until the end because I will be sharing a very personal story that I hope encourages you. Now, let's get into chapter 13, beginning with verse 1. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, he and his wife and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. Well, this is more than expected. Notice again how the word of God is pointing out the fact that Abram took more than what he was instructed to by the Lord. Verses 2 through 4. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, silver and gold, and he went on his journeys from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there previously. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And he called. Notice how that even though Abram was very rich in livestock, silver and gold, he went back to where the Lord had told him, where he built an altar and he called on the name of the Lord. Abram has not forgotten that it is the Lord who has increased his wealth, guided and protected him on his journeys, even after he lied to protect himself as if to help out the Lord. Moving on with verses 5 through 7. Now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents, and the land could not support both of them while living together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the livestock herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Now the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land at that time. Not big enough for two. Notice how Abram's nephew Lot was also blessed by being with his uncle Abram. Now, I don't want to read into this something that isn't there just to say that it matters who you surround yourself with. Since the land could not support both of them, it only stands to reason that there would come a day when things would become tense due to the simple fact of proximity. Let's unpack the depravity over there. Notice who is living in the land. The Canaanites, who we know are the descendants of Ham, who were cursed by Noah after seeing his nakedness, following his drunken stupor. So we know that they are already cursed and can logically conclude that their behavior is reflective of this. Continuing with verses 8 through 11. So Abram said to Lot, "Please, let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are relatives. Is the entire land not before you? Please separate from me. If you choose the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you choose the right, then I will go to the left. Lot raised his eyes and saw all the vicinity of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt going toward Zoar. So Lot chose for himself all the vicinity of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. So they separated from each other. So let's talk about the split. Notice how Abram is a natural leader in how he stepped up and recommended they split before they tear their familial relationship apart. Also, take note of Lot and his decision making process. He is given a choice, much like the choices we are given every day. But notice that it says Lot raised his eyes and saw, instead of Lot went before the Lord. Why is this important? Because it shows that Lot relied on his own observation of what was before him, very short sighted, instead of going before the Lord to inquire on which direction he should go. This also shows us that even though Lot was in the presence of his uncle and saw how he was before the Lord in worshiping and making altars, does not mean that Lot was immune from making bad decisions. So, who you're around matters, but ultimately, the decisions you make are yours. Moving on with verses 12 through 16. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the vicinity of the Jordan and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked sinners against the Lord. The Lord said to Abram after Lot had separated from him, "Now raise your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land which you see I will give to you and to your descendants forever. I will make your descendants as plentiful as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can count the dust of the earth, then your descendants could also be counted." Let's discuss the promise. So much to unpack here. Notice how Abram settled in the land of Canaan while Lot settled in the cities. Lot wanted what looked good in his eyes, what seemed right to him. But could it also be because Lot wasn't supposed to be on this trip? Let's also take note of the fact that Lot did move as far as Sodom, which would indicate that he tried to distance himself from the exceedingly wicked sinners. Isn't that hard to do when you put yourself there in the first place? Notice how after Lot left, the Lord showed Abram the promise, as if to say, "Now that Lot is away from you, I will show you my promise." When God has something for you, it is for you and you alone. Notice how the Lord tells Abram, "For all the land which you see," which is a lot of land, but more than that, it is not speaking to specific dimensions or parameters, but that all of it will be given to his descendants forever, which means that the current inhabitants are squatting. Now, look at this promise made to his descendants. keeping in mind that he does not have any children of his own, and he's 75 years old. And the Lord is telling him that his descendants will be as plentiful as the dust on the earth, which is impossible to count. The Lord is making a promise that only he can do and keep. No man can do this thing, and yet he's already tried to intervene by lying to keep himself alive, and the Lord has continued to bless him mightily. Verses 17 and 18. Arise, walk about in the land through its length and width, for I will give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and came and lived by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. So let's talk about these altars. Notice how every time Abram has an encounter with the Lord, he builds an altar, a place of remembrance. He is marking the place where the Lord spoke to him, and his response is to build an altar as if to say, I believe and I want to remember. Let me ask you a question. Have you built any altars commemorating where or when the Lord blessed you? I'll share a very personal story that happened between me and my wife a few years ago. We went through a pretty difficult time, and it was quite dark at times. But if it wasn't for our faith in God, and more importantly, trusting that He would do a magnificent, unbelievable, and miraculous thing, we wouldn't be here today. And to mark the occasion of the Lord showing up and moving the way only He could, we built an altar in the backyard. And every day we would go outside, pray, write something on the brick, and then place it until we had this altar around a tree. Just thinking about it reminds me of how truly amazing the Lord is and all He has done for us. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord cause His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up His countenance towards you and give you peace. Amen. See you next time right here for chapter 14.